Well, let's go ahead and get started this morning. Thank everyone for coming and dialing in to us. I'm Bill Meyer, managing partner of Strothman and Company. Those of you that know us know that in our almost 40 years of existence, we've had a commitment to education, to presenting seminars. It's been somewhat difficult in the era of COVID, but with the help of our team, we've been able to do it successfully. We're really looking forward to the day when we can get back with everyone live, but that's not to be right now. In our almost 40 years of existence, we've served primarily entrepreneurial companies, but also nonprofit organizations, most of whom have an entrepreneurial mindset. And we're really blessed to have a couple of those clients with us today, the Humana Foundation and the Healing Place, to participate in our program. Nonprofit and governmental services clients make up about 20% of our firm's revenue. So it's a substantial commitment that we've made there. Our nonprofit segment industry group is led by Mark Turner. Mark has been with our firm 10 years. He just celebrated an anniversary. He does a great job in serving clients. He's very client focused, and he's done a great job of leading this nonprofit segment and putting together this program today. I'm really excited about the program. We have over 200 people registered for a Strothman Company seminar. That's huge. So I'm going to turn things over to Mark, and Mark is going to introduce our first presenter.
All right, thank you, Bill. So we're very excited here today. We're excited about our speaker. Today we have Walter Woods of the Humana Foundation. Walter is going to speak to us today about redefining fundraising and service delivery in 2021. So Walter is the Chief Executive Officer of the Humana Foundation here in Louisville, Kentucky. Walter is a recipient of the Johnson & Johnson Fellowship, and his work has been profiled in a number of publications. He is a board member of the Greater Louisville Project and is a Louisville City champ. His interests include international adventure travel and classical piano. Just a fun fact, interesting fact about Walter, he has visited 6 of the 7 continents. The only one he is missing is Australia, which actually makes him the only person that I've ever met who has actually seen a penguin. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Walter.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. I want to take a little time here to thank Strothman and Company for the series, for the work that you do in our community and strengthening our nonprofit sector, and look forward to continuing to work with you. Before I start, I thought I'd ask just the question of everyone. One that I really start out with in conversations these days is not really asking people how they are, but instead asking them, what are you grateful for? So when I think about what I'm grateful for, I think about each of you on the phone that are joining us today and all the work that you continue to do to strengthen our communities. And I also think about my family, my father and my sisters, and grateful for the fellowship and friendship that I have with them. So in starting out the conversation, I thought what I'd do first was to really start out by thinking about self-care, making sure that as we strive for balance in our lives, especially these days, we really think about the different types of self-care that we're practicing, and we're intentional about that. When you think about our physical self-care, the 2 things that I want to highlight here are sleep and rest. Sleep is very important, and rest is also very important. The difference being one is with your eyes closed and the other is with your eyes open. Emotional self-care is also important, and I think the idea of forgiveness and being able to recognize that people are going to make mistakes, and it's important to be able to forgive not only yourself but others around you for mistakes that are made, and to try to power through those. Social self-care, I want to talk a little bit about positive social media. We are being inundated daily by negative information. And it's important for us to be realistic, to live in the world and to understand what's happening in the world. But it's also important for us to be intentional about making sure that we include positive social media in our lives. There are lots of good things happening in the world, and in addition to the things that we see, the other things that we see. So it's important for us to be intentional about recognizing that and celebrating that and taking time to reflect on that. Some of the things that happened yesterday, for instance, very positive movement forward. And so I think it's important for us to be intentional about that. And the last type of self-care is spiritual. And with this, I want to highlight connection. The idea of connecting to something bigger than yourself, I think is important. It helps us recognize that there is something bigger than us. And it keeps us connected to that idea that it's important to be, to understand that, to explore that, and to take the time to just recognize that that does exist. So in striving for balance, these are the types of self-care that I practice. I encourage my team members to also practice these things, and we talk about it as the first thing that we talk about before we have a conversation. So I really wanted to take some time today to start out our conversation talking about this and being intentional about it. I do encourage you again to practice self-care, to take the time out for yourself. These are really turbulent times right now. There are lots of things that we're going through, and it's important for us to recognize that. But it's also important for us to recognize that we need to take care of ourselves. So with that, I will go into the conversation that we're going to have now. When I first got the invitation to have this conversation, I really wanted to think about what is it that I could talk about that really is relevant to what we're going through right now. And I really wanted to talk about this disruption that we just went through in 2020. The coronavirus will permanently change the way the world works and operates. And so it's important, I think, for us to use this disruption to rethink how we advance our strategies differently. One of the things that the foundation did initially was to take a pledge, that we would do our grant making intentionally differently, being a little less lenient, being a little more lenient in some of our regulations, some of our policies in terms of how we give money away. And that was one of the first things we did. So really the importance of being here now and recognizing that in this very moment, we have to be responsive and addressing some of the issues that we're seeing that are coming up right now today. So that was one of the first things we did. Another thing that we also recognized is this sense of individualism. There would be less of that going into this new disruptive world, recognizing that people would be better able to see how their fates are linked as a result of what we just went through in 2020. I think it's giving us a chance to reconsider who we are, what we value in the long run, and it will help us rediscover the better versions of ourselves. So this disruption that we just went through and we are continuing to go through is important to help us rethink who we are, what we're trying to do, and how we want to do it. So in thinking about that, what I did was I'm going to focus first on service delivery in 2021, recognizing that we're only a few weeks into 2021. So a lot of this has not yet come about, but I think it will be coming about. And what I want to start out first is talking about the how of service delivery. I will then go into the strategy of service delivery in 2021 and geographic and demographic context that all of this is going to happen within. So when you think about what happened in 2020, let's see, how did you learn about virtual seminar? We just posed a question. We just put a question out there. If we could ask, this is a poll that we'll be conducting throughout this conversation. If you could just answer the poll and submit your answer as you get these questions, that would be very helpful for us. Thank you. So the first thing, when you think about the how of service delivery, is funding. We know that in 2020, funding was a challenge for a lot of nonprofits. There was a revenue loss and an increased cost related to COVID-19 response efforts. I think that will continue. As you know, we are still dealing with the pandemic and we still have a ways to go. So I think we're going to see that funding trend continue. The challenges within funding will continue to be paying staff, resulting in cuts and furloughs for staff. So how do you, as a nonprofit, how they will be thinking about how they provide their services, but doing it differently, potentially with fewer people on their staff. That's one of the things that I think will continue. I think we will also see supply shortages. The shortages, not only food, but lack of access to PPE and cleaning supplies. I think that will continue to impede the nonprofit's ability to deliver services. Donated supplies are very important. We see that organizations are really looking for food in particular. They recognizing that there's a big need for food in our communities and household products to continue to serve the communities that they're working in. The lack of PPE and cleaning supplies will also be an issue. That's something that communities are continuing to struggle with, and nonprofits are trying to provide innovative ways to provide those things. I think that will continue to challenge the delivery of services safely. That's one of the things that continues to happen. And the other part of the service delivery that will be impacted is technology, and this need to transition all of staff to a digital infrastructure that will continue to be a major challenge for the agencies that are working in the nonprofit space. And this includes really how are you supporting the staff that are working remotely? Because a lot of people are not going back to work. There's still the issue of how are we bringing people back to work, and that will continue. The impact there is really to delivering the services that the nonprofits offer. And how do we do that differently, potentially through an online only service and reaching out to clients that way. And the issue of reach clients that don't really have technology, they either lack it or they have slow service. So that is also another issue that I see continuing, and I see nonprofits thinking differently about how to provide their service using technology in ways that they haven't before. The strategy of service delivery from what I'm seeing is really about providing additional services. And this really comes about through partnership and collaboration. We have at the foundation encouraged nonprofits to work together. We think that collaborative approach really creates greater sustainability with solutions. And I think that going forward into 2021, we will see more of that. We will see more nonprofits working together in ways that they have not worked together in the past. I think that's a good thing. I think most agencies are serving the same client base, but they're thinking differently about how to serve that client base through collaborations and partnerships. So we see the types of different collaborations really bringing in organizations that provide greater access to food, to educational supports, to connectivity through technology, and emergency financial assistance funds. So that type of additional services, I see that continuing to happen. Again, I think that's a good thing. I think we will see organizations addressing community needs in a faster way as a result of doing that. Geographically and demographically, I think the needs will continue to be around food security, education, and health. That continues to be in the conversations that I have with the organizations that we're working with. There are over 24 community foundations that we're supporting across our footprint. The conversations that we have continue to show the needs in the communities as those top three things. I think that will continue to be the case, unfortunately. Food security continues to be a need that is growing, and it's growing in ways that it's unexpected. It's not a matter really of not having enough food in communities. It's a matter of getting food to those or to the individuals that need it. So it's really a logistics challenge that communities continue to be faced with. So we will see more of that. We will see organizations like Feeding America and their food banks being much more responsive and addressing innovatively ways of bringing food to people when they need it. That's an opportunity I think that we've seen met in a lot of our communities. And I can think of one in particular in San Antonio, Texas. We work with the food bank there, and they are, in terms of collaborating, working with another organization that we support called Oats. And so they're combining some of the needs that they see their communities faced with, food needs as well as social connection needs, and building community around those things. Community building, I think, sustains a solution if you're able to embed this idea of social connectedness within a solution. I think it lasts longer. And so we see organizations like the food bank down in San Antonio able to think differently about how they provide additional services. They are starting to work more intentionally with policymakers on addressing some of the policies that are impacting communities negatively, especially when it comes to food access. So we see that as well. I think advocacy and this idea of educating policymakers is one that we see more nonprofits moving into. The foundation itself is beginning to think about that as well. As a foundation, we're not able to do any lobbying, but we are able to educate. And so that's what we plan on doing going forward, is being a little more intentional around that, making sure that our policymakers are informed with solutions that are working in communities that they serve. So I think that that will be something that we'll see more of in 2021, is this idea of advocacy and education and technical assistance in terms of helping policymakers really understand their constituents a little better. So with that, I wanted to then talk about redefining fundraising. So again, to go back to the beginning, this is what I was talking about in terms of self-care. Again, going through this, we want to be focused on physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. Just went through service delivery in 2021. This is what I was talking about, the how of service delivery, and how I think that will be changing in 2021. The strategy of service delivery and the geographic and demographic content, and now really focusing on redefining fundraising. So as we go into 2021, I think that the things we want nonprofits to really prioritize is around these three questions that you see at the bottom of the slide. Why do you do what you do? Really being intentional about understanding what the social impact is that you're trying to create in the communities that you're working in. The second question is around economic viability and how do you fund what you do? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. That's what the rest of this is going to be about, is focusing on that. But the third question is what supports what you do? So this idea of capacity to deliver. How are you preparing yourself in developing your capacity to deliver the service that you're providing to the communities that you're working in? So when you think about the first question around why do you do what you do and the social impact, I really think that what matters here is revisiting your vision, really being intentional and understanding what impact are you trying to create? And how are you planning to create that impact? The disruption last year really forced a lot of nonprofits to focus their services, their efforts and their vision, refining their vision, really being more intentional about what your mission is. I think that's really important in going forward in 2021. It's continuing to do that. That will force a lot of nonprofits to collaborate and to partner in ways that they haven't in the past, because they will be more focused themselves on refining and focusing their services in ways that will force them to think about additional services through partnerships and through collaborations. I think that's a good thing. I think being more collaborative it strengthens the community, and I think those solutions that are generated as a result of those collaborations are more sustainable. The idea of capacity to deliver and who supports and what supports what you do, is with this idea really around the core to sustainability. So the leadership capacity that you have as an organization really is about quick decisions in response to evolving challenges. So last year, we saw a lot of nonprofits pivoting very quickly in the new environment, really trying to understand how to be more effective with the services, the resources that they have, and providing them to the clients that they work with. Adaptive capacity was one thing that we saw a lot of people displaying, this rapid prototyping of approaches, quickly failing, this idea of failure and doing it quickly so that you learn from that and you become better at providing the services that you provide. We saw a lot of that. I think that will continue. The collaborative capacity. So to say that you want to collaborate with other organizations and you want to partner differently is not easy. That really, there has to be a culture to that. So really developing a culture that calls that out, being intentional about that. We saw nonprofits doing more of that last year. I think that's going to continue going into 2021. Teams with collaboration skills are going to be stronger because they're able to bring on new partners and integrate themselves quickly to provide a solution that's more effective. Leadership models and incentivizing leaders to be better at collaborating, I think, is important. We will see more of that. Technology capacity, this critical to business continuity idea is important, making sure that nonprofits are able to use the technology in ways that they haven't in the past, that allows their staff to work remotely, that allows them to reach more clients differently through technology. I think is going to be also going to be very important. So with the core to sustainability, those are the things that I think we're going to see more of. So when you think about economic viability and how do you fund what you do, these are the things that I think will continue to happen and we will continue to see. We will see an increase in demand for services that we saw near the end of 2020. We will see that continuing into 2021. We will continue to see disruptions to funding streams. We will see an increased virtual engagement, and that will really equate to reoccurring giving will be more important than ever. This idea of how do we keep funders and donors engaged continually and meeting them where they are on their turf is going to be more important than ever. We talked a little bit about collaborations between CBOs. I think that's going to continue to happen, community-based organizations. We will also see an increase with collaborations with private organizations. And this idea of remaining agile will be a strategic imperative. We have no idea what's going to be happening going forward. We learned last year that disruption really forces us to be more intentional. I think that's a good thing. I think that we will continue to see that happen. So in thinking about funding strategies in that environment to consider, these are the things that I think we should think about. It's mobile optimization. We recognize that technology became more valuable than ever before last year because we weren't able to come together because of COVID and the pandemic. And so what we saw were organizations becoming more creative around the way that they use technology to keep people engaged and to meet people where they are. So we saw things on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, lots of live streaming in ways that we hadn't seen before. I think that will continue to happen. I think the more intentional nonprofits can be in terms of engaging their client base as well as their donor base through technology, it's going to be helpful to the organization. Younger donors, we also saw something happening there. The Gen Z born after 1996 became valuable. They're called the philanthro kids, and these are people that we saw throughout the year really stepping up and thinking differently about how to engage their networks for the causes that they support. I think that will continue to happen. We will see more activists, younger people stepping up and helping organizations in ways that we haven't seen in the past. I think monthly giving programs will be important, and a lot of you have these already, but I think it's going to continue to be important for organizations. Mobile giving is going to be important, and making sure that we stay again in touch with our younger donors in ways that we haven't in the past, I think is going to continue to be important. Let me go back to this. Okay, here we are. Another thing that I see as an opportunity is personalized outreach. This is something that a lot of organizations, I think, kind of dropped the ball on, is this idea of developing an email strategy, even as simple as a signature block. Some of the emails that I receive don't have ways for me to reach back out to people. There's no phone number. Obviously the email is there, but there are opportunities, I think, through things like your signature block to include a link to your website, to include a link to a donor page that you might have on your website. But I think we want to, in 2021, really think about the personal outreach that we're using to reach out to potential donors and helping them understand who we are and what we're all about. This idea of meeting donors where they are on their turf. You have that opportunity every time you send out an email. So think differently about how you do that. Corporate giving, there are lots of opportunities I think that a lot of nonprofits don't take advantage of. Corporations have matching gift programs. Some people don't recognize this, and so making sure that you help educate your client, not only your client base, but your donor base on opportunities that corporations give to match a donation gift that they give to you. I think that there's an opportunity that a lot of organizations aren't taking advantage of there. There are volunteer grants that corporations also have. So when some of their associates go out into the community and work with an organization, they have an opportunity to lift that relationship up, take it back to the organization, and as a result of that, get a grant for that relationship that they have. I really think that looking at the grant making programs that corporations have and the gift giving opportunities they have is another thing that people should be more intentional about going into 2021. And the donors and stakeholders. So this, to me, is the biggest part of the opportunity I think we have when we talk about redefining fundraising. Transparent conversations with donors are very important, really helping them understand where you are, helping them understand the needs that you have, and how they can support you in ways that maybe they haven't thought about because they just haven't thought about it. So really finding ways to be very intentional about how you maintain the relationship you have with the donor, how you keep them updated on where you are with needs, where you are specifically with the opportunities and how you see them fitting into those opportunities. Really having a conversation on a continual basis that helps you understand their dreams, because really what you're talking about is combining the dreams of a donor with the needs of an organization in a way that is a win-win for both parties. So being intentional about those conversations and thinking about new engagement strategies that continue the conversation. So calls in particular, I happen to like, the conversation and not using technology, but to actually have a conversation with the donor and being intentional about that. Setting up times that you sit down, just asking donors where they are, how are they doing, what are they grateful for, and then beginning to have a conversation, a dialogue about how they can help you address some of the needs that you have as an organization. You can provide in those conversations education, not only about the organization, but also about the topics that you're talking about. So a lot of donors might think that they have a deep understanding of where the needs are and how the needs were developed, but sometimes that might not be the case. So there's an opportunity to educate donors and to really help them understand a little bit more about the issue and how you are, through your mission, addressing the issue in a very specific way, how the collaborations that you are bringing to the table are also helping you address those issues and really walking them closer through the solution that you have developed. I think there are community building events that you can host virtually. I think I've seen some of you do this. I think some of them are very successful. You send out a link and you encourage people in their networks to join you and coming together to discuss a topic or to celebrate something that the organization has done successfully. I think those have been very successful. I think we will see more of those happening going forward. And advocacy, again, this idea of educating not only policymakers, but communities on how they can be involved in the work that you're doing and how they can be helping you move forward a solution that addresses needs that the communities that you're working in have. So I think those strategies are ones that will be helpful going into 2021 in addressing the needs of the communities. I think, again, meeting donors where they are on their turf is the key to this. Being intentional about that, calendarizing conversations, making them intentional, either deciding if you want to do them quarterly or biannually or annually, but just having a conversation about that so that they are expecting you to come to them and not just ask specifically for funding, but to really just understand where you both are and how their dreams can help address the needs that the organization has at the moment or will be having going forward based on your research that you're able to provide to them in terms of needs and where they're going. These conversations are happening all across the country. The community foundations that we work with are bringing donors together to have focus group type conversations, to also learn from them how they perceive the needs and really trying to figure out solutions around the input that they're providing. So I think that's an opportunity also, is bringing donors together to have a collective conversation. I've seen some of those happen very successfully. But generally, again, it's really being intentional and transparent about those conversations that you're having. I want to take a look now at any questions that might be coming up. Oops.
Walter, we did have one. I sent it to you in your message, but I can read it if you'd like.
Yeah, can you read those?
Yeah, absolutely. So this question came from the audience was, with nonprofits working on collaboration, do you see a possibility that they will combine into a larger organization as a practical way to handle finances and administration, or stay separate and only collaborate temporarily?
Well, I think that depends on the organizations. I think in some cases, if two organizations decide that it's better for them to come together and combine as one, I think we will probably see some of that in 2021, but in a lot of cases, that might not be the case, and partnership might be the best way for them to move forward. So I think that's kind of a case-by-case situation. I think it really depends on what the two organizations and the boards decide are best for them and is best for the community.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. That's the only question we have right now, Walter, but I'll just remind everybody, please keep sending me your questions and I'll pass them to Walter when we get them.
Great. So I think in going back, I think I want to focus again on young donors. I think we have not done as a sector really a very good job of bringing in younger voices and integrating those younger voices with older voices. So this is one thing that I've talked about in the past, is the younger voices that are in the community are, they are the future. So it's really important for us to make sure that we're intentional about trying to bring those voices into our decision making, into our conversations. And I think the opportunities to collaborate with organizations across the age spectrum does exist, and I hopefully will see more of that in 2021. I think the opportunity is out there, and we just have to realize it in terms of bringing people together that can help us understand a little bit more about the communities that everybody is working in, but to see things from a different perspective. So the outreach that we have to younger donors, I think, is important. And again, the ways that we can do that is through mobile giving programs, developing a sort of stickiness there, and working with that population, and really thinking about, when you think about the Gen Z the Gen Z population, is how do we tap into that energy that they all have? You know, they are recognizing that they're doing things differently. They're using technology in ways that that we have not seen people use before. And so how do we use that energy that they're creating, that innovation that they're creating, to think differently about how we work with all of our donors? I think that there's a huge opportunity there to be intentional, to be more intentional about that. With the economic viability, I also think I talked about collaborations. I talked about that increasing between CBOs, community-based organizations, and private companies. I do see that continuing. I think organizations are recognizing that they have resources that they want to deploy in a way that helps the organizations that are already working in the communities. I know with us in particular, the Humana Foundation and Humana, we talk about Smurf capital. So this idea of social, moral, intellectual, reputational, and financial capital is one that we're being more intentional about. So in the past, we have focused on financial capital, but we really have not been very intentional about focusing on some of those other forms. We obviously have volunteers. We have 12,000 associates in Louisville alone. And so how do we use that intellectual capital to think differently about working with organizations and helping them address the needs that they have, that they're addressing in their communities? We are looking at a skills-based volunteerism program that allows us to be intentional about providing skills that our associates have to nonprofits and helping them address the needs. There are also social, moral, and reputational capital opportunities that we have. And again, I think I talked a little bit about that when it came to the advocacy opportunity I talked about. We have an opportunity to really think differently about how we educate policymakers. So thinking again about the messages that we want to develop to help our policymakers understand even more the needs of communities is a direction and an opportunity I see in 2021. We here at Humana will be again working on a skills-based volunteerism program. We tested a model at the end of last year, the fourth quarter, that was very successful, where we brought nonprofits together with our associates. There was a specific issue they focused on. At the end of that conversation, they had a path forward. And it was a session that I think lasted about 3 hours. We plan on doing more of that going forward and being more intentional about that. So corporations are recognizing, private organizations, that there are different opportunities for us to engage with the sector other than financial. So using our intellectual capital to help the sector in its work, whether that be through strategic planning or any other type of need that they have, but to really be intentional about how we focus that work. I think we'll see more of that going forward. We'll see more organizations, private organizations doing that type of work. I think that's something that is needed. We have a relationship at Humana with the big brothers and big sisters. And so that's a path that we're moving down, is to really be more intentional around that specific piece of work. We've been working with them for over 15 years. And we're just now starting to think about this idea of intellectual capacity and how do we help deploy some of that across that organization so that they can work with more kids that they're working with. Another question for you to take a look at and to answer just popped up. If you could take some time to answer that question and submit it, that would be very helpful for us. Any other questions come up that I can address?
Walter, we have a few questions here. First question from the audience, please define the difference between collaboration and partnership.
Okay. A collaboration in my mind is an intentional effort by two organizations to come together around a common purpose. It might be episodic. I think that really helps define it as episodic. I think a partnership is more long-term. It's something that you recognize that you're going to be doing for a longer period of time. And it's also around an issue, but it lasts longer. So I really think it's a timing issue between the two things. While collaboration, I think, is more episodic, and a partnership is a longer term, intentional relationship that you're establishing with another organization.
Okay. All right. Next question. How do you recommend connecting more intentionally with Generation Z? They, for the most part, avoid talking on the phone and having the deep conversations we are able to have with older donors.
That's a good question. I think the best solution to that is to ask them directly, to let them know that you want to have a relationship with them, and to ask them how they would want that relationship to evolve. Again, going directly to the source and finding out from them what they want and how they want to engage. Once you've decided that they want to engage with you, I think it's important that you work with the willing. Sometimes we try to work with people that are not willing, and that might not be the best use of our time. I think to first of all establish that they're willing, that they want to work with you, and understand why they want to work with you. So again, going back to this idea of understanding what their needs are, their dreams are, and how they align with your needs and your dreams. So establishing that, having the conversation around engagement, how they would like to be engaged, maybe understanding what you don't have that they think they need, or that they recognize that they need, and how to develop those two things and bring them together so that you're both able to work together, I think is the best way to do that.
Okay, we have two more questions actually. As a whole, not comparatively to other generations, is there any data to show that Generation Z gives more through social media as compared to email?
Yes, there is. I can send that to you.
Okay. And last question. In several previous conversations of philanthropy, there has been a discussion of foundations reevaluating their giving, which would include less restrictions, but more support to funding operations and marketing expenses. Has Humana Foundation taken into consideration of the way you fund organizations, specifically smaller organizations?
We have. We are in the process of evolving our grant-making process. We recognize that after last year, we did things very differently. We developed over 40 new partnerships as a result of the $50 million the corporation gave us. We signed the pledge, the Council and Foundations Pledge, which requires us to be less restrictive. We recommended to our board that we do that, and they agreed. We are doing that, and it's something that we're working on right now. It's something will be announced soon. We're going to put that on our website, probably early to mid-February. You should be able to see something on our website about that.
Okay, Walter, I think that's all the questions we have right now.
Okay. I think unless there are any other questions, I think I'm finished. We talked about redefining fundraising. We talked about how to go about doing that. Again, I think these are just my opinions. I think there's based on conversations that I've been having with the organizations that we work with, especially our community foundations. Everyone is busy pivoting and in some cases evolving things that they were already doing. I think one of the things that we recognized is the pandemic did not necessarily cause us to do things differently. They just caused us to accelerate what we were already doing, recognizing that we were on the right path. We just needed to do it more quickly. So that's what we will be continuing to do, is evolve strategies that we have. We will be announcing some things fairly soon, so you should be able to see that on our website. I want to again thank everybody in the audience for all the work you continue to do to strengthen our communities. And if you want to talk further, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always here to talk.
Okay, Walter, thank you very much. That was great. I think we're going to take a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we've got a great panel here for everybody. So we'll start back here at 9 o'clock.
Hey, Mark, we did just receive one last question. If we
got one? Okay.
If you have a moment. Well, so Walter, here's one. So when trying to be intentional with your efforts, what criteria do you use to prioritize which issues should be targeted, and how do you measure impact?
Well, at the Humana Foundation, we are looking at social connectedness and embedding it into two impact areas. One is financial asset security, and the other is food security. So our focus will be on those two things, with this idea of social connectedness embedded into those. We recognize that solutions that build community are sustainable. We like this idea of building community, and that's one of the things that we want to see components of in those two impact areas that we're going to be focusing on. In terms of measuring impact, we sit down with our grantees, and we decide that together. Those are things that we co-create. We have a general idea of what we want to look at, but we want to make sure that the grantees that we're working with are able to provide the metrics. So we do that together. That's one of the things that we sit down and do together.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll take a quick break.
Hey, Mark, I just noticed that there's another, someone has
another one
asked,
popped up. Okay.
yeah, is the Humana Foundation grant open for applications for fiscal 21-22? And when is the open date?
It is not open yet. We anticipate that will happen soon. We don't have a date yet, but we have not typically opened at this time. We're still talking through some things before we open that up, but it will be on the website, and that's where we'll put all the information about that.
Thank you, Walter. So we will now take our break, and if everybody will try to be back by 9 o'clock, we'll be ready for our panel discussion.
Leader in advancing marketplace trust. We try to make sure that consumers and businesses work well together to resolve their issues in the marketplace. We also have a 501c3 organization. It's our charity review program. It's under that. So if you'd like to reach out to us about charity review services, we do go through a process with charities. We also do a lot of talking about scams and fundraising through our CEF 501c3 foundation. Personally, I've been with the business or the organization for 15 years. I have been CEO for 4.5. I have an MBA, and I am getting ready to finish my very last class for my second master's degree, a master's in psychology and industrial and organizational psychology. So getting excited about finishing that up. I think that's all I've got.
Okay, great. Next, Karyn, if you'd like to introduce yourself and just tell a little bit about your organization.
My name is Karyn Hascal. I'm president of the Healing Place. The Healing Place is a program serving primarily folks who have problems with drug and alcohol addiction. We've been in business for nearly 35 years. We have 3 campuses, 2 in Louisville and 1 in Campbellsville, Kentucky. We have a wide variety of services, virtually the whole continuum of care for folks who are struggling with drug and alcohol abuse. We have for residential services about 1,000 beds available for folks who need it every day. We have been studied by the University of Kentucky Center on Drug and Alcohol Research for the last 15 years, and we have outstanding success rates, if you will, people who maintain abstinence from drugs and alcohol after leaving our programs.
Okay, that's great. And our next panelist, Jeff Ashley. Jeff, if you'd like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. And honored to be with Reanna of the BBB, where Ashley Rountree is an ethics award winner, and then also with Karyn at the Healing Place. And the Healing Place has been a longtime client of Ashley Rountree and Associates. We're actually entering our 20th year of serving the nonprofit sector in this region. And we work with organizations to help grow philanthropy, really anything that is the business of the nonprofit. We do a lot of board development, a lot of strategic planning. We do executive searches for nonprofit leaders, build capital campaigns, giving programs. And I know Walter talked a lot, and there were discussions around collaborations and partnerships, and we are facilitating a lot of that really over the last several years, anywhere from outright mergers to helping kind of play matchmaker for collaborative and true partnership efforts. So we've worked with about 400 nonprofit clients around the region and continue to grow every day, and just happy to be here and appreciate everybody's time. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, and thanks everyone for being here today. So we'll just jump in. Karyn, we'll start with you. So the Healing Place helps men and women to overcome addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing an increase in the need for addiction and substance abuse services? And if so, how is the Healing Place responding?
We are indeed seeing an increase in our need for services, and we know because of some of the data that we're looking at that there has been a significant increase in overdoses. Again, we went through a period of time a few years ago when heroin was very popular on the street. We saw a lot of overdoses and a lot of overdose deaths. Then we saw that decline somewhat, and we saw the increase in methamphetamine. But now with people being closed in their homes and unable to work, we've seen an increase in alcohol use and an increase in overdoses with methamphetamine mixed with fentanyl. So the need certainly has not declined as some of the other activities have. What we have done is we've had to make a shift to be able to serve people more immediately. We've expanded our outpatient services to make more services available to more people. We've had to make a shift in some of our other residential services. We've expanded our detox capacity to meet the need. So for us, it's been about flexibility and pivoting to meet the needs as we see the population changing.
Okay. I forgot to mention also, just like before with Walter, if anyone in the audience has any questions for the panel, just direct them to Vince Kane and we will get your question asked. Okay, Karyn, thank you. Also, the next question for you, much of your industry deals with in-person services, such as in-person counseling. How have you been adjusting your services accordingly in this current environment we find ourselves in?
Well, I think just like most people, we've gone to a lot of virtual services. We, for the first time ever, are having virtual meetings that are initiated in our facilities, but then are available to people on various platforms, Zoom and Teams and things like that, so that we can have people from outside of our facilities inspire the people that are in the facilities without having to be in person. So we had expanded our technology capacity over the last couple years, not ever anticipating that this was what we would be doing. But we found ourselves able to use that technology and to pivot pretty quickly with that. And we've had to have made arrangements for smaller meetings, social distancing, and all those kinds of things. But we're doing a lot more virtually than we ever did before. So we're still able to work one-on-one with people and to meet their individual needs. We're just not able necessarily to do it in person.
Okay, that's great. How much do you all rely on volunteers? Do you find you're still able to get the volunteer services you were in the past?
Yeah, our primary cadre of volunteers is in our free health department, health clinic. And initially, those folks weren't able to provide services as they had. We have a cadre of volunteer doctors, nurses, pharmacists, nurse practitioners who see our clients. And we were able to start providing those services virtually. And for other volunteers, we looked for other ways that they can help support the organization rather than being in person and doing things directly. Oh, apologize for that. Sorry. Doing things directly. We've had volunteers out helping us access masks and gloves and other PPE that we need for our clients and our staff. And we've been able to rally our volunteers to do those kinds of things rather than coming into the facility and providing some of the, again, face-to-face services that they ordinarily would have. So we've really seen that as an opportunity to be more creative about how we utilize our volunteers and how we're able to engage them in our work. And we really have seen our volunteer activities grow as a result of this, because it's put us in a position to think outside the box.
That's great. That's awesome to hear that you're actually still able to get volunteers and that you're actually seeing growth in that industry. Jeff or Reanna, if you have any other thoughts on what you're seeing out there.
Reanna?
Well, if you want to go first, you can go first.
Okay. Oh, sure. Thanks. We're just being so polite. No, but I think what Karyn said, and kind of taking a page of what Walter said too, just, thinking about meeting people where they're at, and kind of asking before you ask. So I know the Healing Place does a great job of engaging with its constituents, and you can't really assume anything these days. So, asking folks, okay, well, how can we engage with you? What are those volunteer activities? What do they look like for you? And don't assume a yes or no answer, engage and get a direct answer. But we're seeing that too, those organizations that are engaging with people and meeting them where they're at. Again, things you've heard already. They're moving forward and they're getting things done. And, it's just that matter of kind of adapting and being flexible to meet those needs.
Great. And I will say that, first of all, Karyn, thank you for what you do, because I know it's been a heck of a year for everyone. And I know it would be hard for you guys too. So thank you for all that you do. And you guys are a charity seal holder with the Better Business Bureau too. So that's a lengthy process to go through, and we appreciate your support and we want to support you. As far as the community and the way that we've been doing our services, so much of our services are already online. So we have had to streamline some things a little differently, but quite frankly, COVID has helped us streamline better. It's made us stronger as a team. We do have some issues where we cannot have people in the building right now, obviously with the COVID and everything, but because we every once in a while had a few walk-ins. Again, most of it's online, most of it's via phone calls. So what we would want to tell everyone is BBB is still up and running. We're still going, taking complaints, processing them, taking reviews, and we're still getting that message out there, educating the community on scams too.
Okay, great. Reanna, you mentioned complaints, so this next question is up your alley. So, a big part of what the Better Business Bureau does is resolve disputes and handle complaints. I would have to think that in this stressful time, you're seeing a lot more of that. So, are you seeing an increase in complaints, and has the nature of the complaints that you're seeing, are they changing?
Sure. So we are seeing more complaints. We saw around 5,000, well, it was 5,022 in 2020, and it was 4,732 in 2019. So we're up around close to 300 more complaints this year. I think the biggest thing is my complaint department was telling me the overall demeanor of them is alarming. People are very angry right now. They're just, they said downright mean in filing the complaints. So that is an issue. The most complaints we're hearing about are, we've got like the top 5, the first one's wholesale major appliances. So like GE, restaurants, health insurance, extended warranty contract services, and then online shopping is rounds out the top 5 for us. Basically what we are seeing is a lot of the businesses are getting complaints against them because they're depending on manufacturers for shipping. Some cases that's international shipping. So there are a lot of complaints coming in on places like GE and Appliance Zone because they can't get the products right now because everything's back ordered because of COVID. Let's see. A lot of complaints have also been just very simple complaints that we've received because it's basically consumers can't get in touch with the businesses because of COVID. So, some people are laid off, the phones aren't on, people are working from home. So people can't get in touch to get their warranties or shipping information at this time. What we are seeing though, customer reviews are down compared to complaints over last year. But we are seeing a lot more 5-star reviews. So people are wanting to get the word out about good businesses. And we're also seeing our hits online. People are looking at the business profiles online more. They're actually up 167,000 compared to last year. So we're thinking that more people are trying to check online before they actually buy.
Okay. We actually have a question for you on complaints.
Okay.
If we had an issue with the company 6 months ago, are we still able to file a complaint?
Yes, go ahead and file that complaint. Pretty easy, just go to bbb.org. Okay. Yeah, go to bbb.org and you can click on file a complaint there and we'll walk you through the process.
Okay. Have you had to change the nature of how you handle complaints and resolve disputes in the last year?
Yes, we've always been very diligent about contacting companies if they get a complaint, whether they're an accredited business with BBB or not an accredited business. So we've always tried to contact them via email, phone calls, mail if needed. So we've always been diligent. However, at this time, we're even more diligent because we want to find out if they have been affected by COVID. There's a lot of people short-staffed, not the correct people handling complaints the way that they should have been. So there's a lot of changes. And as a system, as a BBB system across the country, we've all been a little bit, given a little bit more time on answering those complaints because we realize that there are issues out there.
Okay. Another thing that I've read about or I've heard about is there's a lot of scams around COVID these days. Are you all seeing any of these scams? And can you elaborate on some of these COVID related scams so just that the audience can be aware and know what to look for?
Sure, absolutely. So we are seeing a lot of scams out there, and I try to get on the media, and we always put it on our social media too. So look us up on all the social media channels, Better Business Bureau Louisville. But we are seeing obviously the stimulus payment scams. We were seeing the fake vaccines, the fake vaccine trials at one point. People are still trying to get the vaccine. We're seeing scam artists contact people saying that we'll send the vaccine to your home, but you've got to pay a fee for it. Don't fall for that stuff. It's horrible. We're also seeing scams with a COVID twist. So we're seeing a lot of people that they're looking for rental homes, but the person who owns the rental home says that they can't go show the home to you. But if you want to keep this home, drive by it and then wire them a payment. So there are things like that out there as well. A lot of puppy scams online, employment scams as well, reshipping scams, all COVID related. They use a COVID twist to them. But I think the biggest thing we've seen is the online fake websites. It is so easy to be scrolling on Facebook and see something that you really like. Maybe it's that cute fancy dress that you always wanted, or some kind of a new gadget. So many of these sites are fake, or if you go on them, you'll find something that's, you'll end up getting something that's really cheap. It's not worth the money. So we've seen a huge rise in online fake websites. And in fact, we have Scam Tracker. We've been following these scams. And in 2015, online scams were 13% of all scams reported. In 2020, it was 64% of all scams reported on our Scam Tracker. And it's a great place to go to check out scams. It's bbb.org/scam tracker. You can go on there, you can report scams, and you can also look at the type of scams that are in your area and across the country.
Yeah, that's great. That's some good information. I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you, Reanna. One of the things that one of the audience members asked they want to get everybody's thoughts on what they believe the local nonprofits should focus on in 2021 to move their missions forward. So, Jeff, I want to get your thoughts on that first, and then we'll jump to Karyn, and then Reanna will let you jump on after that.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts with this, and we've, it is first and foremost, I think, having clear and concise and focused communication is really, really important. So having a good message and with some clarity around it. And, one of the things that we have seen work especially well and kind of cut through all the clutter, if you will, and all the noise is doing that through storytelling. Trying to find stories that show impact and relevance. Those are two key terms we also stress: impact and relevance, in making sure that it's relevant and impactful to the community that you're serving. So really that would be at the top of the list, and that is driving a lot of other things in terms of philanthropy, in terms of volunteer engagement and other successes that we're seeing moving forward. But I would say that would be at the top of the list, and a lot of other things to follow behind that.
Karyn, your thoughts on that as well, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've done is to focus our message on investment. We see gifts to the Healing Place as an investment in our community, and having that be a very clear and focused message, I think for all nonprofits is going to be important moving forward, because we're in a time of rebuilding in our community, I believe, and each nonprofit has a role in that rebuilding and renewing in our community, and defining that message and being able to offer to donors solutions and things that we can all do together to renew our community, I think is a valuable message this year. But I think this year more than ever, we really have to be clear and concise and defined in our niche and our message.
Thank you. Reanna?
I think for us, you know, the first step is getting the entire team involved, getting on the same page, deciding how we want to move forward. You know, we came up with this amazing strategic plan for 5 years last year, right before COVID hit. And we were all so very excited about it, with involvement from every team member across the organization. So I think the beginning of the year here, we're going to sit down, we're going to look over that strategic plan, regroup. I think that what we want to do and what we need to do is share what we actually do in the community. A lot of people don't understand who we are and what we do, and how much we do, how many services we provide in the community. They don't understand it. Some people think we're a government entity, and we're not. We're a nonprofit. So I think it's going to be a lot of storytelling, a lot of social media, a lot of videos, sharing what we are doing in the community, and even more partnerships than we've had ever before.
Gina, if I could piggyback on that just as well a little bit, you know, I think it's important for, you know, everybody to know too, that the nonprofit sector, and by the way, I hate the term nonprofit, you know, it really, you know, it's just a tax status. It's not a business model. And, you know, while we don't have shareholders, we certainly have stakeholders, and, you know, we need to operate in that capacity and have some accountability and so forth. But I think it's important to note, you know, coming out of 2020 with all the issues that were spotlighted and still spotlighted, the nonprofit sector in the Commonwealth of Kentucky is the 4th largest employer in the Commonwealth. So we can't be set aside and, you know, and say, oh, that's, you know, that's those folks that do good. You know, we got to do good and do well at the same time. And in Louisville, in terms of economic impact, and I'm not sure this is a good thing, to be honest, for the Commonwealth or for Louisville, but, you know, we're the sector is also the 5th largest economic driver in Louisville. So, you know, we've got to be a part of the economy. We've got to be a part of the recovery. We've got to be a part of social solutions, you know, really kind of all of the above to move forward. And so Shelby, to your, you know, your question, a very good question about what to focus on, that messaging and storytelling. But we've got to be, I think, also bold and, you know, a part of recovery and kind of solutions to some of these problems that are out there. And that's going to drive mission. That's going to get people's attention. I will say that you know, Walter mentioned this around partnerships and collaborations and mergers. It's easier said than done. You know, that sounds good, and it is very necessary. And we're, you know, I think a lot of people want to drive it, but it is hard work to partner with an organization, to collaborate with an organization, because, you know, sometimes you've got your way of doing things and another group's got their way of doing things. But to Walter's point, it is important to drive to that, because I think that's how we're going to be successful. And then frankly, you know, we're hearing, and again, I think this goes to the question too, we're hearing from funders, the funding, not only corporate and foundations, but also individual donors. They want to see that. They want to see that you're at least trying, you know, and collaborating and talking and kind of checking egos at the door and, you know, moving some things forward. And again, I think that's easier said than done, but that should be a part of the focus as well moving forward.
Yeah, so Jeff, that's a good segue into my next question for you. So, you know, most nonprofits, you know, depend on this fundraising to survive. And so what are you seeing as the top 2 or 3 trends as it relates to fundraising as we go from 2020 to 2021?
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, there's some continuing trends, I would say. One is donor advised funds. Donors that are leveraging or using donor advised funds at places like the Community Foundation or Louisville, or maybe through Fidelity or you know, other things. There's the National Christian Foundation out of Atlanta. we're seeing, well, let me put it this way, in halfway through 2020, the amount of donor advised fund gift transactions was almost triple what it was in 2019. So the activity that was taking place through donors that use donor advised funds has increased dramatically year over year, 2020 over 2019. And then just anecdotally, I was on a call with several community foundation heads late last week, and they saw significant activity with the stock market being up for calendar year end. So transactions of appreciated stocks that were dumped into the donor advised funds, and then even after the first of the year as well. So here's the thing, those gift transactions have already been made. The dollars are in their accounts. The donors are deciding where they're going to allocate those funds. So if I'm building a strong fund development plan, donors that have donor advised funds are at the top of my list. That's big. Second thing, and Walter mentioned this, was monthly recurring gifts. It's a great entry point for donors. We're talking the $5, $10 a month donor, and really focusing your annual fund messaging and communication to leverage that monthly donor. And there's a lot of strategies that are proven, that are working to engage even with younger donors and older donors. It used to be that the technology was a barrier or a hindrance, and you kind of had an age range of people that would make online giving and so forth. Now that barrier is gone. So that monthly recurring donor, and that provides for sustainable revenue streams. And then Gina, the third thing I'd bring up is what I would call blended gift conversations with major gift donors. And by the way, pre-COVID, a lot of people said there's no way we can ask somebody for a 6-figure gift or even a nice 5-figure gift over Zoom. And well, that's been proven wrong. You can, and you can engage with people. People have shifted. So we're seeing, face-to-face, if you will, Zoom meetings where, working with individual donors where major gifts are being solicited and closed. And what I mean by a blended gift is where you're also having a conversation with the donor about not only a current cash pledge, but also adding in an estate plan gift, and asking them to consider doing kind of both those things in one fell swoop. And because of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of people who have put off their planned giving have made that a priority. People's mortality has become more to the forefront of their thinking. And they said, well, I better get my plans, my estate plans in order. And so we're seeing a lot of folks across a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds do planning. And so having that conversation with your donors, your long-term donors, your major gift donors, about how they can make a planned gift is pretty important. And the last thing I'll add to that is just don't, a lot of times planned gifts, people's eyes glaze over, they get intimidated by it. But in the last 13 years, 80% plus of all planned gifts that have been realized in our region have been through either simple bequest, so they add you to your will, or through an existing life insurance policy where they've made your charity the beneficiary. So you don't have to get into crats and cruts and real complicated things. You can keep it pretty simple in that regard. So Gina, those would be kind of the 3 top things that I would suggest nonprofits focus on in terms of fund development trends moving forward.
All right, thank you.
Just want to remind everybody about the polling questions. I think one just popped up here. So everyone go ahead and do that. And Jeff, we had a question for you. An audience member asked, do you think the trend of giving from donors will continue throughout 2021?
Oh, definitely. People kept giving. In fact, giving was up across all sectors. We haven't gotten the full picture for all of 2020, but through the first 6 months, giving was actually up around 6% total year over year, which might be surprising to a lot of folks given just the uncertainty. But we're seeing from donors who are engaged, they are anticipating, yes, continuing giving. I'll also add this because I think this is important. when you look at the buckets of philanthropy, if you will, where does philanthropy come from? It's really important to note that 80% of all giving, and this is in our region too, comes from individual donors. So while we really, appreciate and depend upon, the great foundations and corporate givers, they make up total about 20% of the giving. So, don't forget about individual donors. And again, the all indications are philanthropy is going to continue to be strong going into 2021.
Karyn, do you have any thoughts on that? Is it how it relates to your organization? Have you seen a trend in giving from individuals?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's twofold. We have a very strong development department. And we have 6 full-time staff in development, and their focus has been nurturing those individual donors and forming those relationships, because people give to people. People don't give to organizations, sometimes causes, but people give to people. And we have amazing stories, and you have to, in my view, have those people in your development department who can tell that story with sincerity, and then ask for what they want, what we need as an organization. So because that's been our focus, based on Jeff Ashley's recommendation, of course, because that's been our focus for the last several years, is really developing the strength in those donor relations. We did okay in terms of meeting our goals this year, and we have set a stretch goal for next year. So we are not going to take our foot off the gas at all. We are going to continue to develop the donors that we have and increase our donor base. That's also been a focus of ours for the last 5 or 6 years. Those are just ongoing activities for us. But we think that we anticipated seeing a significant decline, but we really didn't see it. It didn't happen. And I attribute that in part to what Jeff was talking about. There has been a lot of philanthropic environment here in our community this past year. But I also then think that the Healing Place Development Department has done just a yeoman's job to stay out there and to stay focused. They've worked very hard to meet their goals. It's also important to have real specific goals, I think.
I totally agree. And, and just getting your story out there, because if people are passionate about what services you provide, they're going to give. You just have to make sure that they're aware of it,
Yeah. And Gina, I'll just add too, because the Healing Place does such a great job of engaging and building relationships. And as Karyn said, it's, there's a runway on this. And you think about it, people give to people. Relationships typically don't just happen overnight. They take a little time, and, you have to focus on that. But it's also interesting because, again, I think Healing Place, lots of groups in Louisville do this really well. Others could get a little more maybe bolder about it. Is the biggest reason people don't give is they're never asked to give, So, I mean, you can storytell, but at some point you have to, ask for the order and ask people to invest in your mission and what's going on. So, that's a, may seem like plain as day, but, you got to ask. So.
No, I agree. Sometimes just asking the question is just the hardest part.
Yeah.
It sounds easy, but some people definitely struggle with it.
Yeah.
Just wanted to switch gears a little bit here because I wanted to make sure we touched on this. So, not-for-profits, a lot of times are going to depend on grants. Applying for grants can be very stressful. So I just kind of wanted to get you all's take on, what's the biggest issue that you're finding that you're having or your clients are having in the grant application process?
I'll start with that if that's okay. Yeah, I think it's maybe twofold. First is, well, maybe threefold. First is knowing the funder and knowing what their funding priorities are and what their funding parameters are. I had, and I say this with all due respect, and I've had this happen a couple times in board meetings, well-intentioned board meetings, board members have said, well, gosh, can't we just get Bill Gates to write us a check? He's got he's got all the money. And it's like, well, yeah, that'd be nice. But number one, you don't know Bill. Number two, Bill isn't interested in, what you're doing, your mission, and so forth and so on. So, pre-qualifying those funders that match your organization, that have interest. And most funders, define what their specific interests are and are pretty clear about that. So that's probably number one. Number two would be reaching out and engaging. Walter said multiple times in his presentation, hey, pick up the phone and call me. I like to talk. A lot of nonprofits, surprisingly, are a little afraid to do that. They're hesitant to do that because they just don't feel that. But that relationship is just as important with the grant process as it is with an individual. And then number three, a big barrier is just it takes a lot of time to write a grant. We have, that's one of the services we provide for nonprofits is either supporting a development team. Sometimes we do a little bit, sometimes we do it all, but outsource grant writing. And but then articulating a strong narrative and a strong case for why that is, because they're going to say no more than they say yes, just on the sheer number of grant applications that are received. 2,800 nonprofits in Greater Louisville, so it's a competitive market.
Yeah, I'll add on to that a little bit. We have a very specific niche, as you can imagine, and we don't necessarily fit into the criteria that some grantors have listed. And we used to spend a lot of time, seemed like a lot of time, trying to pursue grants that we really didn't qualify for. So I think really knowing who you are and where you fit in to the foundation environment and other grantor environments is really important. And don't waste a lot of time with people that absolutely just don't have you as a priority. Just kind of get on with it. Okay, well, fine, they have other priorities, that's fine. We finally had to accept that. Then I think what Jeff touched on, you have to have the ability. We have a full-time grant writer, but it's about having relationships with those grantors as well and nurturing those so that they know what your organization is. They know how your organization is changing, because we have changed over the years and we have to communicate that to folks. We've changed dramatically and our message has changed dramatically over the last 30 years. And continuing to stay in contact with foundations and their directors and sometimes their board members to let them know how you're changing, how you're adapting to the needs of the community, and just keeping them informed and not always just contacting them when you want to submit a grant, right? There are other times, as Walter said and as Jeff said, they just like to know what's going on. They just like to have a conversation. And we can't take them out to coffee anymore. And we can't do that sort of thing, but a phone call or just an email. But I think it's just important to nurture those relationships as it is to nurture relationships with individual donors. The other thing that we've done we have a full-time grant writer, and she is not always focused on the big catch. She's cranking out a lot of smaller requests and being very successful in getting smaller requests. Well, over time that adds up. You can spend all of your time focusing on one huge grant, and we do that too, but don't forget about the smaller grants that are out there, because they really do add on to your bottom line. And they're just as important as the big, huge one. And that's been kind of a shift in our thinking over the last several years, is not always just going to the same half a dozen people with a great big request.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I like what you said. I mean, sometimes good things happen when you quit emailing and pick up the phone. You know, it makes all the difference if you talk to them in person, which we can't do as much anymore, but you know, we can still use the phone. So I totally agree. So I don't, do we have any other audience questions? Or actually, Karyn, no, I think we just got a question for you. All right, Karyn, you've maintained and even grown your development staff over this tough year. What advice would you give to other smaller nonprofits who may not have succeeded in making a case for growing staff to the CEO or board?
Wow, that was a softball question. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We really made a clear, concise decision several years ago to invest in our development staff. We knew that we were always going to, that philanthropy was always going to be really dependent on us. We listened and learned from Jeff Ashley and Mark Rountree and others who have helped us along the way. And they eventually convinced me that you have to spend money to make money. And investing in a development staff and having the infrastructure and the processes, having the databases that you need and having clean databases that you can actually use ultimately saves you money than just having those voluminous lists of donors that are basically meaningless and it's sometimes 20, 30 years old, and you spend so much time spinning around in minutia that you get nothing done. And under the direction of our development director, Marla Highball, she has developed that infrastructure that has allowed us to be much more efficient, I think, at a time when we really needed to pivot. I mean, in March, last year in March, all bets were off. And we've seen, a reduction in other revenue streams and stuff, but not in philanthropy, because they were, number one, well-trained, well-informed, and they were able to be efficient when it came to doing their work. And that takes an investment. So I really think that the message to board members and to other directors of nonprofits is that you have to spend money to make money, and it really is a game changer when you have a development department that is focused, goal-oriented, and efficient in their work. And that only comes through training. All of our development staff have been to training, sophisticated training to learn about the world of philanthropy. And so they're all speaking the same language. They all have the same tools that they're working with. And at first, I didn't really want to spend that money either. It made me kind of nervous. I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot of money to send somebody to Indianapolis for training, and they're going to be gone for 3 days and all that. But it has paid off tenfold and more. Because here we are in this time of COVID with our development department setting stretch goals for themselves for 2021. Instead of trying to figure out how we can roll back and save money, we're figuring out how to grow. And I really attribute that to the commitment that the organization made to development and its role in our existence.
So we've had another question pop up. So many donors are not interested in funding administrative operations of organizations. And this is really critical, to the ongoing visibility of nonprofits, especially for small organizations. So what advice would you give for funding administration and oversight functions? Jeff, you want to tackle that one or?
Yeah, that's a great,
Okay.
great question, and one that comes up quite a bit. And, you know, it's a tricky question because you have some organizations where 100% of their focus, their mission is their people, right? And overhead. And, you know, that is their programming and so forth. So it's really hard to measure it apples to apples sometimes, but it's a good question. Two things that we have seen work really, really well is, number one, you know, kind of this culture of philanthropy feel is that if the organization first takes the step to really embrace philanthropy as missional to the organization, it's you know, it's just as critical. Like for the Healing Place, you know, I think I can say this without overstating it, but you know, the mission on addiction recovery and the great programs that are there, you know, that's core to the mission. In philanthropy, and the Fund Development Office is also core to the mission. So it's being unapologetic about that, it kind of internally, and kind of embracing that and framing that up in such a way internally first. But then secondly, you know, and Stephanie too, specifically, one of the ways we have seen this work with donors is, again, words matter, is talking about capacity building. You know, instead of saying, hey, we have operational overhead, and it's being unapologetic about it, you know, the need for operational support, but it's kind of talking about it and positioning it as capacity building for the organization. In order for us to grow, in order for us to fully meet our mission and our vision, we need this level of support in these critical operational areas. And, you know, so it's around capacity building. And I think, you know, donors are beginning to come around to this. You've got folks like on a national scale, like Dan Plata, who, you know, are talking about this. And, you know, but I think if you try that and you kind of shift the conversation, be unapologetic, and show the impact that the investment in really capacity building type of operational priorities, what that looks like, and make that a part of your strategic kind of priority set, just as much as you would a particular program. We're seeing impact in moving donors to different ways of thinking around that.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I think one of the other things we wanted to talk about was budgeting and forecasting. So, Reanna, how do you see with everything having to manage, you know, a nonprofit and things that have happened over the last year or so? How has that impacted how you forecasted and budgeted going forward on a yearly basis, or maybe out, you know, 3 or 4 years?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I lost a lot of sleep over it, for sure. And I think we all have lost a lot of sleep over it because we're all still learning and it's still fluid. And I think that's part of it. What we did is we looked at more of the last 5 years instead of last year, and how it affected us, because there were a couple of tighter years in the last 5. So we were able to take those numbers and average them a little bit more to start working on 2021. But at this point, you know, it's going to be flexible. We are still obviously holding back on some expenses. We feel that travel expenses are going to continue to still be down. You know, office expenses are going to be continue to be lighter because people are working remotely. We have not completely filled the rest of our staff at this point because our total operations are not completely open because people aren't walking into the building. So we're doing so much from home and online and via the phones. So it's going to be a challenge for everyone because we don't know the direction everything's going, but we will just have to be fluid and continue to make changes as things occur.
Thank you. Karyn, do you want to chime in at all on that one, or?
Yeah, well, we're doing some of the same thing. Now, we can't reduce the level of staffing because we're a direct service organization. So our staffing is what it is, but we're being very conservative, and we actually stopped any ancillary spending last March and got used to tightening our belts. And that's something that the Healing Place knows how to do really well. We've had lean times in the past, and we know how to do that. So we put some other processes in place with our finance department to make sure that we're looking at cash flow on a monthly basis instead of quarterly. We are monitoring all expenses. We put some other sort of processes in place to make sure that we're staying focused and that we are being conservative. And we are a very conservative, I would say, very conservative organization. You've got me at the end of the line saying no a lot, which is not really my favorite thing to do. It's not my general demeanor. But in times like this, I think we have to balance needs versus wants very carefully. And we have to have a clear conversation with our staff at all levels about, is this something we really need, or is it something we like, or something we just want? And our staff are so helpful and cooperative when it comes to that. They understand that, our biggest expense is salaries. So, we have to be really careful about other things. And it was like Reanna, it was just a very difficult process going through budgeting this year because there are so many unknowns. So we have to just be so careful and so conservative and focused, I think.
I'd like to add something too. I think that as the person running the organization, I think it's so important to be transparent with your employees. I have a heck of a team, and Mark knows, he's on our board. They have been working so hard to help cut expenses. They've been working, 1.5 jobs themselves. They have really, they have a passion for what we do, and they love the team. And I think that they highly appreciate the transparency. And also, big part of it is just taking care of your employees. Remind them that their health is the most important, that times are hard, to take care of their mental, their mental well-being, and take care of themselves and their families too. So during these hard times, you can't always do salary increases or bonuses or go out to lunch together, but you can give them their time for their mental well-being as well.
Yeah, I want to support that. We're doing a lot of that as well. The thing that's number one on my priority list is employee appreciation and recognition.
I'll add real quick, because I agree totally with what Karyn and Reanna just said. And I would just add 2 quick things to that is, maybe think about a contingency budget, actually writing a contingency budget and having that, in the wing. So you don't, when something happens, you don't have to deal with that as well. And then secondly, really engaging your boards and the expertise, the finance expertise, the business expertise, and so forth on your boards in the conversation, the finance committee, obviously, but the entire board in the conversation. So, I think that's important as well.
Actually, that segues right into our, I think we have a CPE question that just came up. If everyone could just answer. And this question actually came in for all 3 of you. What is your best advice, or what worked for you to successfully get your board more engaged?
Well, is it okay if I start?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we had a board of 28 when I became CEO. And a lot of the board members, might show up to 1 meeting a year. They didn't do a whole lot, volunteer wise or monetary for us. So I started developing a board report card and keeping track just of what they did, how much they did, if they donated anything, donated their time. And I shared the board report card with them at one point. And, basically said, look, guys, we've got a lot of people on this board. Some of you aren't doing what you need to be doing. And I'm going to ask you now, and I know it sounds horrible, but I'm going to ask you now to either commit to the board, take part in the board, or leave the board. So, I mean, you know, I wanted a strong board that would help move us forward, that would take part, that would be passionate about what we do. And now I have a very strong board of 15, and everyone takes part for the most part. I know a couple of them have a little emergencies here and there, but they take part, they volunteer, they give me feedback. That's, you know, don't be quiet on a board, give me feedback. So that's where I started, was with the report card, because some of them were actually surprised that they weren't doing anything.
Yeah, lots of moving parts with this question. That could be a webinar in and of itself, but I agree, Reanna. And, you know, don't be afraid to move somebody off the board and have that conversation. That's healthy then for kind of the whole board as a whole as well. And then, you know, one other thing that I would just add to that is again, ask your board members what they want to do. A lot of times, I had a conversation recently with an attorney that was on a board, and he was asked to do nothing but legal work for that particular board. And he just completely disengaged. And when we helped ask the question, well, what do you want to do? Not, you know, we know what your skill sets and attributes are, but what do you really want to do? He mentioned that he was involved with his college newspaper. And so he said, I practice law all day long. I'm kind of sick of it, you know, when I put my volunteer hat on. So he joined, long story short, he joined the Marketing Communications Committee and became re-engaged. So it's asking, you know, where do you want to be involved? Where do you want to be engaged? And again, don't assume just because they have a particular skill set or attribute. You know, I think you got to, again, ask and engage in that conversation. But there's a lot to unpack with that question, honestly, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, very true. And I agree with what's already been said. We've done some of the same things. We've invited board members to leave the board because they really weren't participating, and that was okay. Maybe they were just busy or burned out or whatever. You know, we have most recently asked our board members to serve on a committee, and what's your interest, what's your passion? And we were actually kind of surprised. You know, it was that same sort of scenario. You thought that the lawyers wanted to do legal work for you and they really wanted to do fundraising. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Well, we don't know unless you ask. We're really lucky in that we have a very passionate board. And as much as I dislike remote and virtual meetings, Zoom meetings and team meetings, we actually have a lot of board members participating because they don't have to drive downtown. They don't have to go anywhere. They can stay at home or in their office and participate in a meeting. I continue to believe that we've lost some of the communication from that. I don't really like it. I would still rather be in a room, but you know, they do participate in the meetings on Zoom and those kinds of things. So, you know, there's kind of a give and a take to it. We have that large board too. We have 35, it's interesting when you have such a large group of people. You have to make decisions, but we've just been really fortunate. I think we have a very active board.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think we've actually gone a little over. So is there anything here before we close that you all would like to add?
I would just like to thank you very much for inviting the Healing Place to participate and to have this opportunity. It was really an honor for us to be able to be here and partner with Strothman. You guys have been an amazing partner for us for a long time now. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We enjoyed having you, and we enjoyed having you all. Everyone, and Vince, help me out here if I miss anything, but you will get an email recording of the presentation today, and your information on your for your CPE if you need CPE. But in closing, go ahead, Gina, I'm sorry.
One other thing I was going to mention, we're finalizing all the details on the rest of our seminar series for 2021. And we'll hope to have all that finalized by the end of the month. So be on the lookout for more information to come for other seminars like this. So we appreciate everybody's attendance today. And thank you to our speakers, our panelists, and thank you to Walter as well.
Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed it.